tell you the other thing, though, guys, that Democrats have got to focus on, and if we don't, it doesn't matter what the messages are. And that is, we've got to figure out new vehicles for our message. The young people, Josh, that you were describing, it's not that they don't care. They're just not tuned into the news. They don't particularly care for politics. They're not tuned into the news, so they're not listening to legacy media like CNN or MSNBC or even Fox. They're doing other things, and they're getting their information in different ways. And they get information, not news. And we've got to figure out how to get messages in that information space. Yeah. Whether it is social media, whether it's podcasts like yours or others, whether it is through TikTok. Somebody on Fox News, Jesse Waters, who I rarely quote, said recently that Democrats were still operating in the 90s when it comes to messaging. And I quoted him on that, but I disagreed with it. We're not operating in the 90s, we're operating in the 80s, okay? We're anticipating, we think if we get an op-ed in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the LA Times, that we're reaching people. That if we get on CNN or MSNBC, we're reaching people. We're not. We are absolutely not.
Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy, as always, whenever we can slide in some time with our favorite U.S. Senator, Doug Jones. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Oh, guys, I'm doing great. It's great to be back with you. I hope y'all are well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We see you around on MSNBC and other places, and always with very informed and factual takes on what's happening in the world. And God, we missed that in the Senate. It sure would be nice. But I kind of wanted to get you on because I know you were at the protest in Tuscaloosa last week, and I guess just kind of give a feel for what happened over there with a protest and what the vibe was, I think, around town with Trump visiting.
Well, Josh, it was really good. There was a lot of energy, and I tried to tell folks, and with all due respect, I don't think it was just a protest. I mean, yeah, there were we were protesting, but this was really a rally. This is really a movement that's happening, I think, around the country, where people are now recognizing exactly what's going on. We were talking before we went on here about how just it seems like every hour you get hit with something that is as much as misdirection as anything else. But the fact of the matter is people are afraid. They're scared. They're concerned about where we are headed right now. And that Donald Trump is concerned about it too, because he has completely changed his tune about the economy. He's gone from the golden age and prices are going to immediately come down and the economy is going to be the greatest it's ever been and everybody was going to get rich, to telling young children that they can only have $2 and a couple of pencils. And he has really, really dumbed down, is the only way to say it, his rhetoric about the economy. So last week in Tuscaloosa, you had a lot of people who were there to stand up, to speak out, and to let this president know that not everything is good. They do not believe him. That they are not seeing the things that in some cases that people voted for. Beto O'Rourke came in and gave a great talk. I'm hoping he'll run for the Senate again in Texas. But I think across Tuscaloosa, the vibe was, on the one hand, the president's coming. On the other hand, oh my God, the president's coming. Why the hell is he coming to Alabama? And what was really funny, I saw Joe Goodman's article on AL.com quoting the young guy who was so excited, and there was hope in the air because Nick Saban was was the one who was going to be talking at commencement. So it was I just really enjoyed the day. It was great being out with folks and to see the excitement from young to old and all. I looked out of that crowd and it looked like Alabama.
Yeah. The last time Trump was president, we had kind of a similar, maybe not as good of a buildup of Democrats and resistance and just it's felt like there was some momentum that built up over the course of those 4 years to get him the hell out of office and to help Democrats up and down the ballot. Um, and so with that happening in Tuscaloosa, and you see the energy that's there, I know it's happened in other places. There have been rallies in Huntsville, huge rallies in Huntsville. There were some in Montgomery not too long ago as well. Is that something that Democrats in Alabama can build on? And the second question is, are they building on it?
Well, here the answer to the first question is absolutely yes. Um, we built on my election in 2017. We built on that, with a lot of great people running in 2018. The problem in 2018 was that everybody, because I had won in 2017, everybody thought they could win. We had flipped Alabama blue, which
Mhm.
was not the case. And I kept going, "Oh my God, please time out. That's not the case. Understand what you're doing." But we had some really good candidates that showed up. Walt Maddox was actually very competitive in that governor's race. Um, After the election in 2020 and then going into 2022, we completely faltered. Well, we just weren't competitive. But I think that what you feel out there is a momentum right now with Democrats from one end of the state to the other. There is a palpable feeling of energy out there, and it is time that we can not only build as Democrats, but we can also persuade those more independent voters, the like voters who don't vote very often,
Mhm.
and others to kind of, we need to do something different here. We need to, Jesus, I hate to quote George Wallace, but you essentially need to send some folks a message around here. And so, yes, I do believe that Democrats on a local level, and you guys know how careful I am parsing my words here, that Democrats on a local level are being energized and they are working in their local communities to try to get folks engaged. I expect on Sunday, May the 18th, for anybody that's listening down there, I'm going to be in Fairhope to do kind of a thing with the Democrats, maybe even a town hall. I'm going to be in Anniston. I expect good crowds, just like we had, maybe
Mhm.
not the 1,500 that we had up in Tuscaloosa, but that energy is out there, and people are looking for alternatives. And I think making sure people stand up and let folks in the state of Alabama, local officials in the state of Alabama that are in office now, saying, "Do not take us for granted." That we
Mhm.
either won't vote or we're going to vote for you. I think that momentum is growing. Not that the Democrats are going to sweep the state or even come close. We may not even win statewide races. Who knows? But we're going to build some momentum and we're going to start getting competitive.
I'm glad to hear you speak with such optimism about the momentum shift. I sense it also here in Madison County. But Doug, I did want to ask you, speaking of where things stand with the Democratic Party, I wanted to know where things stand with you and the Alabama Democratic Party leadership. There was that kerfuffle that happened earlier, and it appears as though it was resolved with the apology that Randy Kelly issued. Is that the case as far as
Well,
you're concerned?
as far as that issue was concerned, the fact that he issued a letter that was absolutely false and defamatory, and he did what he needed to do under the law to withdraw it. So yeah, that issue, when he issued that letter acknowledging that it was wrong, that was not correct, that issue got to put to bed. I still have issues with the leadership of the Alabama Democratic Party or the lack thereof. Okay. I mean, I've still got serious, not, that's not a secret. It's there. I think it's palpable. Anybody that watched or listened in or understood what happened at the party meeting would know that. And so that's why I think that, look, the Democratic Party has often in the past been only a vehicle for folks to be able to get their name on the ballot. There's a couple of the staffers doing a really good job, I think, of trying to hold people together, recruit some candidates, assist people that are coming out that might want to run for office. And I appreciate the fact that they're doing that. But the party itself is a vehicle to get your name on the ballot. Where the rubber meets the road, David, and this has been true of the Democrats for a long, long time, is that at the local level. We have got to strengthen our counties. We've got to strengthen our local clubs. We've got to get into the local communities, because the greatest thing that the Democrats could do at this point, look, it would be wonderful to win statewide elections. Don't get me wrong. But it's also going to be wonderful to just be competitive statewide if we can do it. But where we really have to focus, ruthlessly focus, is on some of our House and Senate districts where we've got a chance to win. Democrats have got to focus on breaking the supermajority in this legislature so that they can really have an effective voice. Right now, we have legislators doing a great job of trying to get the word out there. They can actually get a little bit done when they work with their counterparts, but not much. They know that to be effective, we've got to break that supermajority in at least one house of the legislature. And that's where I think Democrats really need to focus. And that is on the local level. That doesn't necessarily mean the state party. That's what local Democrats can do and really hone in, because I will tell you guys, there's a lot of ammunition to use out there right now against this legislature and against the whether it's the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, but particularly members of the legislature with some of the crap that they did in Montgomery.
Yeah, give us a couple of examples of that, if you don't mind.
Well, a lot of it was their messaging. First of all, I think this legislature is absolutely trying to kill public education in this state. They are taking tax dollars, that hard-earned tax dollars, and they're creating this situation where people who have been sending their kids to private schools for years, not just their new choice to go to a potentially better private school, but have been sending them to private schools for years, in part, David, and you know this, in part because they were just segregation academies, okay? And they did not want to go to a public school where it is much more diverse. And so they're literally trying to destroy public education. There's no question about that. Second of all, if you mention the word Medicaid around the Alabama legislature, they literally close the lids of their desk on top of their head. They will move as quickly away from that issue as possible. We still have hundreds of thousands of people in Alabama that need health insurance, and it's only going to get worse in this Republican regime. It is only going to get worse. But will this legislature do anything to save rural hospitals, to save doctors that are coming? No, absolutely not. They're not going to do that. We are losing OBGYNs. We're just hemorrhaging OBGYNs, and we can't get doctors to come into Alabama. Hospitals are going to close. Our Alabama Hospitals Association has done a wonderful job of educating the legislators, but it just goes in one ear and out the other. So those are just a couple of things. I mean, look, Alabama has done a really good job over years attracting industry, but has that industry then filtered down to the folks in Alabama? Has it really ever filtered down? We are still one of the poorest states in the country. We've got some incredible businesses in manufacturing. So why are we still in low unemployment? Why is it that we are still one of the poorest states? I think the 9th poorest state in the country. We can't get people out to vote. We're still in the lower echelon. We're in the lower 50% of voter turnout because it's hard to vote. So look, I just think, and what I'm hoping is that on a local level, that Democrats will focus as much as anything on their local House and Senate races and come after these folks. Make them stand up and defend some of the crazy stuff that they've done. And there's some of these legislatures that, and I don't have any off the top of my head, that have introduced some really just nuts bills, just MAGA right, that has no business. Our legislature wants to fight culture wars more than they want to work for the people of Alabama, and we need to start holding them accountable.
Those are excellent points, Doug. Excellent points. One final question from me. When Ken Martin was on with us, the DNC chair, he was unequivocal in saying that Alabama was going to be a priority. I want to know from your perch if you think from what you're seeing that is indeed going to be a case, that from here on out, Alabama and the DNC are going to have a healthier relationship, and one from which this state will benefit, so that we can see actually some of the things you're talking about actually happen.
Well, all things are relative, David. Will it be healthier than what it's been in the past? Sure, but that bar is really pretty damn low. Okay, and I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, I take Ken at his word, and I think it will be better, but it's got to be more than better. Okay, I mean, look. I know the term out there with a lot of folks is one that they reel from, but we need a little affirmative action plan for states like Alabama. Okay, we need to get a little more help than some of these other states if we're to build the proper infrastructure, and I don't see that happening. This state, they're not going to see as a competitive state right now. But I will say this: I think that one of the major issues I think with the DNC is they're too fractured. You've got the DNC, but then you've also got a separate entity called the DCCC, which manages a House of Representative races. Then you've got the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and those two kind of work together, but they also work independently. And that's just not a good way to do things. Republicans don't do it that way, and I don't think it's a good way for Democrats to do it. What I do see happening out there right now, and I think this is taking a little bit of time, but I think it's important to take a little bit of time. I do think that there are a number of different conversations, let me put it that way, going on where the DNC will be just a part of a bigger movement. Because there are a lot of conversations out there going on, of which, quite frankly, I'm a part of a number of them, to try to do something to get the Democratic brand to be better across the country. And that includes understanding and focusing on the South, the Rust Belt, and areas of the state of the country that we have been so lacking. If you look at the maps, and I've got some of these, I could send you guys sometime, of areas of the 2024 election. If you go back, 4 election cycles, or go back to Bill Clinton, and you look at the various counties that were won by the Democratic candidate for president, and put them in blue and the ones in red for the Republican candidate, you will see that over time, those blue dots diminished in number. It is incredible how we've just abandoned the heartland and the South, and that there are no areas. And that is in part because of populations that go to the cities. We're still winning a lot of things, but the population shifts are different. And Democrats have recognized, and the groups I'm working with are going to be more of a 50-state strategy, more of a 50-state messaging to try to get the Democrats to understand that it's that center that is where the power is. It is the center where we have the ability to persuade, because right now, the Republican Party is dominated. Unlike the Democrats, where we've got loud voices on the left, the Republican Party is dominated by the far, far right. And that gives, I think, Democrats opportunities that we haven't had in a long time. But it's opportunities to build across the spectrum, from across educational, race, religion, you name it, urban versus and rural. All of those things give, I think, Democrats incredible opportunities. So I hope Ken is correct but there's going to be a lot of other efforts as well that I think will help boost Democrats in Alabama and elsewhere in the South.
It seems as if right now they're just bouncing around the different social media, and looking at what becomes popular with a lot of people. It seems that there are a lot of people. There's a large swath of people, especially younger people, who don't really identify necessarily with either party, who don't really get sucked into a lot of the more, the really political talk, but they are swayed by a more of a workers' rights type message. And there are a lot of people with accents like mine out there who have become very popular on, say, TikTok or some of these other places, and spreading a message of, hey, we got to stop this shit, where we're just, yelling and screaming back and forth, and we're not helping each other, and a message of, being country used to mean that you helped each other out, and now we just criticizing everybody and piling on everybody, and such a message seems almost ready made for Democrats. But kind of like you, with a little bit of skepticism, it seemed. I'm the same way. I don't really see that from a national level. It's doesn't. And maybe there was a poll, and I think Carville talked about it last year, where they interviewed a number of different Democrats and asked them how many of them owned a pickup truck or knew somebody who owned a pickup truck. And I mean, the numbers were shockingly low among the upper echelon of the Democratic Party, and I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem where you don't know people who are living this life,
Yeah.
and how do you change that?
Well, look, first of all, just for the record, Josh, I have two pickup trucks.
Yeah.
Okay. Just for the record,
Yeah.
just saying. Okay.
I got one myself.
Okay, I
Yeah.
feel a little left out of the pickup truck club, but okay,
Well,
okay.
David, we
all right.
always knew you were one of those elites,
That's
that
right.
was the
Over there with his Prius, a jacked up Prius that he's got.
Yeah, very much not, but okay.
Josh, it's a great question, but I can it's the question that I think Democrats have been asking themselves a lot since the 24 election, because that 24 election was a long time coming, and it was in part because we weren't reaching folks where they are, we weren't talking, we weren't listening as much, and that's a lot of the conversations that are going on now, and it's not just messaging. We've got to understand how to reframe some of the things that we stand for, to make sure that people can get those messages. We got to reframe those in ways that makes it personal. I don't know if I've said this on one of your previous broadcasts or not, but I'm now convinced that all politics is personal. Okay. Tip O'Neill used to say all politics was local. Well, it's a little more national than it is local. But the one thing 2024 proved is that all politics is personal. And that doesn't mean in a selfish way. That's not a negative way. It just means that people want to understand and know what you're going to do for them and their families and their children. And are they going to have better opportunities? They want to work for themselves. They don't want handouts, but they want to have the government be responsive to them. And I don't think Democrats have done a very good job about that. In all candor, I think Democrats have focused too much on identity politics, in their emphasis, not and not in a way that explains that when you are focused on trying to help lift one boat, you're lifting all boats. That's where we've fallen down. We seem to have said that we want to help this group, and what somebody is hearing is, well, they're not going to help me, which is not the case at all. And I think
Right.
Democrats are looking now at making sure their messaging that people understand that it's Democrats who brought us rural hospitals. It's Democrats that brought TVA and electricity. It's Democrats that brought Redstone Arsenal. It's Democrats that brought us out of the recession, gave us Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, gave us those safety nets that are needed without just being a handout, but giving those safety nets. I'll tell you the other thing, though, guys, that Democrats have got to focus on, and if we don't, it doesn't matter what the messages are, and that is we've got to figure out new vehicles for our message. The young people, Josh, that you were describing, it's not that they don't care. They're just not tuned into the news. They don't particularly care for politics. They're not tuned into the news, so they're not listening to legacy media like CNN or MSNBC or even Fox. They're doing other things, and they're getting their information in different ways. And they get information, not news. And we've got to figure out how to get messages in that information space, whether it is social media, whether it's podcasts like yours or others, whether it is through TikTok. Somebody on Fox News, Jesse Waters, who I rarely quote, said recently that Democrats were still operating in the 1990s when it comes to messaging. And I quoted him on that, but I disagreed with it. We're not operating in the 1990s. We're operating in the 1890s. Okay, we're anticipating. We think if we get an op-ed in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the LA Times, that we're reaching people. That if we get on CNN or MSNBC, we're reaching people. We're not. We are absolutely not. And that's a big challenge, I think, for Democrats, because that infrastructure is not out there for Democrats. It's like my buddy Joe Trippi, my political guy, always says, every 2 years during elections, what happens is Republicans have owned the airways. They have the infrastructure. They have all of the media, social media, and the mainstream media. They have all of that. They've got radio. They've got TV. They own the airwaves, and Democrats just rent it to try to do a couple of commercials. We've got to get out there, and I think that today's media world gives us those opportunities if we'll take advantage of it.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And it's not just that they own a lot of the media. It's the type of media that they own. It's I mean, Fox News is essentially an arm of the RNC at this point. I mean,
Sure.
really, they're over there giving advice to the president and talking about messaging and, and strategies and stuff. And Democrats don't have anything close to that. I mean, MSNBC is a real news station. I mean, yes, they lean a little more progressive on certain things, but they're still journalists that are given equal time to both sides and all that. Fox News doesn't care about equal time to both sides. And, they're just spreading a message of whatever the RNC wants to talk about. That's a problem.
And Josh, more important, in my view, even more important than that, and you're absolutely right, is especially in a state like Alabama, where local news has all but gone away.
Yep.
Okay. We don't have the same number of local papers. We've got a few dailies in Alabama that are bigger, but nobody really gets the kind of local news when you have to click on it. All right. You don't have that local paper that you're picking up at the newsstand every day to see what's happening in your community. And some of the local radio and TV are even bought, owned by these national syndicates now. And you can only look, you guys go check, and any Sinclair broadcasting station, and I know we've got at least a couple of them in Alabama, you can take a lot of the national stories that their anchors are saying here in Alabama, and you can just substitute them anywhere in the country. And they are giving a message. It is a subtle message, but it is a message nonetheless. And Democrats have nothing to compete with on that level now. So we're trying. That's another thing that a lot of these groups that I'm talking about, it's a lot of what they're looking at and trying to do and treating. There's a new social media platform called says.us that folks ought to check out, because it is going to be one that rewards civility and engagement, and not just the hate-filled rhetoric that you see coming on X these days, and that seems to be drifting over some even to blue sky.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, we'll get you out of here on this. I know you got to run, you got other commitments and stuff, but I did want to ask one thing, kind of bringing it back around to the state.
Don't even go there. I know where you're going.
No, yeah, well, we're gonna go. We got to go because there's gonna be there needs to be somebody at the top of the ticket in 2026 that drives this thing. I mean, whether or not there's an opportunity for first of all, I think there may be if your old nemesis Tommy Tuberville runs, there may be some legal opportunities for a victory. But if not, even regardless of that, I think that we've got to have somebody at the top of the ticket. I believe, and a couple of somebodies actually. I think there ought to be somebody running for AG, somebody running for lieutenant governor, somebody running for governor that drives people to the polls. To help those down ballot races that we talked about, those important legislative races and other things. So, do you know anybody who might be interested in that?
Look, I think you're right. First of all, if we could find good candidates at the top, and look, if we have to be candid, that the Democratic Party bench is not as strong as it should be, because one person, Josh, or even two, can't drive that per se. You've got to have some down ballot races. That's why I'm talking about recruiting for state house and state senate. You're going to see, I think, some pretty good candidates coming out of the Democrats right now that are going to challenge some of these Republican members of Congress that may not have gotten challenged before. And the goal there is as much, to win, but also just to be competitive. And that's what you've got. I know where you're going. And I appreciate it very much. I'm going to tell you, just like I've said over the last couple of weeks, when all this came out about Tuberville, and I agree with you, by the way. And I don't know if you heard my comment in Tuscaloosa. I never even have to finish it, but I kept talking about the cuts of the federal government and the cuts to the Department of Education, and said, if there was one person in the state of Alabama that could benefit from the Department of Education, and the crowd knew exactly where I was going. I'm going to stay in this fight, okay? And I think it is a fight right now. It is a fight for the heart and soul of America, for the heart and soul of Alabama. I've got a lot going on. I am looking how best to stay in that fight with the groups that I'm working with on a national level, the groups I'm working with on a state level. I'm going to stay in this fight one way or another. What that means at this point, I can't say. And I truly can't say. It's not that I'm not prepared to say. It's I really can't say. I want to see how things go. And for someone like me, it's still a little early because of the dynamics are such that I don't necessarily wouldn't have to need the same kind of prep that others do. But I want to stay in the fight, and I also want to help. I want to help anybody that can be competitive in these districts. But again, I go back to something. And that is, Democrats have to be ruthless in their efforts to win certain elections. And that means focusing on elections, on some races to the detriment maybe of others. But we got to try to figure out how to break those supermajorities. That to me is the most critical factor. And I want to help out doing that somehow, some way. So stand in the fight, not answering your questions.
Yeah. Listen, you can say not answered, but I heard you're running. So, all right, that is future Governor Doug Jones, and we do appreciate you, man. I know you slid us in here, and we thank you so much for coming on. It's always great. The stuff is always gold, and we really do appreciate you.
Well, thanks, guys. I always enjoy it. Always enjoy being with you. Keep up the good work.
All right, thank you. That is former Senator Doug Jones, and we're going to come back in just a minute, wrap this thing up. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a minute.